Since quarantine, Netflix has acquired 16 million new subscribers. Disney Plus has attracted 54.5 million paid subscribers in just 6 months, and music streaming subscribers were up 35% in the first quarter. We're stuck at home, so it's not too shocking to see that. And with on-demand streaming up 16% year over year, what does that mean for the future of the industry? And will this curve flatten out too? Here with his thoughts, excuse me. Here with his thoughts on this is Sam Tall. Sam, welcome.
Hey, Peter, how you doing?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm
So
well,
before we
thanks.
get into the, yeah, great. So before we get into this, and I know you want to talk about the UnitedMasters new Select program. You're in LA,
hmm
and Governor Newsom just announced that he may change your lockdown level to DEF-CON red. So give us a quick update on what's going on out there, and then let's get into the streaming discussion.
So I think there's a lot of flashy headlines about California locking down again and doing a new stay-at-home order part two. It's basically the same statewide now that it was in Los Angeles for the past week and a half. Um, Basically, a lot of things were loosening up end of June going into 4th of July weekend, but in the week preceding the 4th of July weekend and the holiday festivities therein, a lot of stuff in LA County was locked down again, including all bar service, indoor dining, gyms, and things like that. Now the state has expanded that to all counties, and that's just because it's not an isolated incident. It's really on the rise all over the place, and it's unfortunately it's not a Californian problem either. We're seeing this in a bunch of other states. New York is a rare exception, tackling it aggressively and authoritarianly in some respects. I mean, Cuomo kind of like laid down the law with that, but it seems to have worked.
Yeah, and we yesterday, I believe it was our first day without a single death from COVID.
Meanwhile, we have record-setting numbers all across the Southeast.
In
It's kind of
Florida,
like
Texas.
it's a tale of two countries almost, and so California is seen as this sort of like communist republic of its own right, but the reality is a lot of California is red counties and conservative U.S. congressmen. So there is sort of a mixed bag on that front. I know, Tennessee is through the roof, Florida's through the roof. And so I just want to, caution everybody, this isn't going away anytime soon. Don't have your concerts, don't have your networking events. Don't, throw your holiday parties or industry functions and things like that. Please, for the industry's sake, we can't do that.
Well, and wash your hands and wear a mask. And we're going to have to suffer now. I mean, as I think New York was a great case study because it still overall has the highest number of cases still, but it was squashed down and now we're slowly starting to reopen and you see our curve going down. And so we're going to see, but you see those states that didn't go into lockdown and now they're starting to feel the effects. So we want to get through this. We want to all get back out there. So a little suffering now will help, prevent long-term suffering. And, hopefully soon enough we'll get a vaccine. But so we're still at home. And that means there's more streaming and on-demand streaming specifically. And just a couple numbers from the Nielsen music report. Total audio activity year date through March is up 14.5%. March 13th through July 2nd. So it's really interesting that they put these numbers in specifically March through 13th when we all went into lockdown to current. So on-demand total streaming is up 13.8%, 16% year over year. Total album sales, I mean, those are down and physical albums are down like 20 and 25 and 35%. But that's that big number is that on-demand streaming. So year to date through March was 20.4%, March to current 13.8%, and then over year, 16.2% in the current time frame. Sam, talk about it.
I love the data. So the important thing to note is that you mentioned Netflix and Disney Plus subscriptions going through the roof, which I think is an important thing. And people are initially in like March, April, maybe early May, folks were saying maybe there's like a dip in audio streaming, which clearly isn't like true on the long enough time horizon. Maybe momentarily that was the case when everybody was very much focused on visual entertainment. I think we've talked about this before, but I have sort of the way that I categorize it is that music is a passive entertainment. Even if you're deciding what to listen to, even if you're putting it on with the intent of listening, it's still something that you can do other things during. Your eyes are not occupied, your brain is not fully occupied, your hands are not occupied. If you're watching Netflix, you have to pay attention or you're going to miss it, right? So the minute you walk away from the screen to go fix a snack or pour a drink, you're no longer participating fully in that entertainment. It's active in that sense. Whereas music, you put it on and it serves as a soundtrack to your life. Now, there are a lot fewer instances to soundtrack when we're not commuting, we're not going to the office and having to tune out our coworkers. So obviously, music streaming is going to take a little bit of a dip, and Netflix, which you're not supposed to be watching in the office, is going to take a little bit of a rise. I think we're starting to stabilize. A lot of things that I'm noticing, especially in the areas of digital media, like on YouTube and other ad-supported streaming platforms, those CPMs are coming back to where they were in February and early March, which is a really positive sign. But it also just means that we're adapting, we're figuring out the way forward. It means that the rise year over year, which we expected, I mean, we expect it to continue, it is going to keep happening. I think the interesting thing, just not that it has massive economic impact really, but I think it's interesting to note that the physical album dip, uh, which is always expected these days, increased once retail obviously was no longer part of the equation, physical brick and mortar retail, which of course makes the Entertainment Retailers Association none too happy. And so that's kind of like the way that you look at that data and say what's happening, what's the story it's telling. Because there's a clear difference between the pre-COVID and post-COVID physical retail. Digital is a little bit more consistent.
Yeah, and I always say we're going to have to put that asterisk for 2020 for any kind of statistic because it is just going to be all skewed. And one other interesting thing is about the number of subscriptions to a music streaming service, and looking at this globally during this pandemic. I was looking at this article and was saying that services in emerging markets used the lockdown to offer free trials and reduced prices. And what they found was that the free trials, that people were converting more. Once they were in the free trial, they were converting into the paid model. So it kind of demonstrated the difficulty of obtaining a subscriber in the first place. But once they're in your ecosystem, it is easier to convert them into a paid customer.
I mean, it's kind of an in for a penny, in for a pound kind of situation. Spotify historically, and I think this has been true for several years, their ad-supported tier has something like a 20 to 30% conversion to premium, which is extraordinarily high. It's a really, really, really strong funnel. And I don't know whether that's because they're annoying the shit out of their free listeners with ads about getting on Spotify Premium, or if it's really just that it's getting so embedded now in cultural awareness that you have to be on Spotify. That's how people are sharing music. And eventually you get tired of the ads or the limitations that are imposed on the mobile app. But I think I'm even that's not a free trial, so to speak. It's not like a 3-month thing like with Apple, but if it's a 1-year free trial and eventually you decide you're going to pay for it, or you go in on a family membership or the new Duo, couples subscribership,
Mhm.
I think it's a great model. I like it. It's the reason we keep growing, and I'm not. I have no reason to be opposed to the continued growth.
Yeah, I mean, I can go on about that duo where it's like, okay, so now it's you can get a couple, which means less revenue going to Spotify,
Oh, the average
and
revenue
that
per
means
user is through the floor,
yeah,
but
yeah. So
the
so
total
how is
revenue is
that going to
up. It's like
increase? Yeah. How is that going to help Spotify? Yeah. So yeah, exactly. And that's not going to, that's a whole different conversation. I've posted on the web about that and my thoughts on that. And the one thing though about the clicking is that annoying people with the start free trial, or it's like, well, I mean, how many of us have set a record for clicks of on YouTube skip free trial? They are it's they are so persistent on trying to get people to convert into that YouTube ecosystem, and it's failing.
Well, it's certainly not as robust as it could be. I think it's grown pretty decently in the last few years that it's been available. And YouTube TV just saw a price increase, so we'll see what that does to their subscribers. But and I'm sure that has more to do with the networks and the programmers wanting to up their license fees than YouTube actually thinking they can charge more for that product. But suffice it to say, I think, YouTube is identified as a free platform. And so when you ask people to pay for it, it's a little bit more friction. Whereas Spotify is primarily a premium platform. They over cater to the premium user and then they underpower the free option, which isn't quite the
Mhm.
case on YouTube. But I think one thing that you mentioned is important, and it's going to carry us into another topic here is average revenue per user is low for advertising models and high for premium models. And when you
Mhm.
spread out how that premium subscription applies to a number of users, of course, the value per that user is going to go through the floor. I mean, if you're an individual subscriber in the US to Spotify, your ARPU is $10, minus whatever the transaction costs and other kind of overhead. But if you're on a family plan, which has a maximum of 6 accounts, and you use all 6 accounts, each person's paying something on the order of $2 a month, or
Right.
it works out to just shy of $20 over the course of a year. And so it's a lot less valuable. Now it's a lot more useful to the user. It's a steep discount, which is obviously super attractive, and it keeps people in the tank long term. And of course, revenue for Spotify continues to go up. Premium accounts go up, so it's largely a positive thing. But of course, average revenue per user is down, which means that the value of each stream is going to go down, which means that it's going to be that much harder for independent artists to create a viable revenue stream off of a limited audience base.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And the other thing is one other platform to look out for that as they are starting to get more music involved is Twitch, because there's been discussion about Twitch going to a subscription model. So that's something to look out for. So we're talking about streaming, and streaming requires distribution. So I'm really trying to find an easy segue here. Uh, so you mentioned the United Masters new Select program in conversation yesterday, and United Masters is a bit of an enigma to me. There's not a lot of information about how it works on their site. Any get started button just takes you to a page saying you have to request an invite, and it seems it solely works on an app. Again, so I know you have some thoughts on that. Let's take this one. Let's go real quick on your thoughts on this new Select program.
So I think United Masters in principle could have been a great idea. It's just been so poorly executed and so wrapped up in the same kind of hype train as Tidal, for example. It was packaged very similarly. I mean, frankly, their office is designed very similarly. It must be friends between the companies. But suffice it to say, they were basically presenting the same model as STEM, and STEM pivoted. They had to, and they cut a lot of client accounts because they were overburdened. AWOL is cutting how much throughput they accept in a given year because they're overburdened, they're stretched thin. This is a distribution problem when you're trying to scale on a low margin. You have to operate at scale, or you have to do less service in order to accommodate. Now, I understand the motives for United Masters to pivot at least some of their clientele from a commission model of 10% to a subscription fee of $5 a month. We're all familiar with how subscription fees work, and so it's a pretty easy pill to swallow for a lot of people in terms of how to budget for it and what to make sense of. But let's keep in mind a couple of the numbers that United Masters threw out when they announced this new tier, this new service. Number one, um, they reported something in the order of like over 5 billion streams, was I believe their number. They also noted that they have a little over 400,000 artists and a little over 500,000 tracks, which tells us a couple of crazy things. Number one, most artists aren't distributing music through United Masters. They're signed up, but they're not actually moving music. Otherwise, it would end up being like a track or two per artist. And we know there are artists who are doing more volume than that, which means that there are other artists doing no volume at all. So they're not getting any commission off of those artists, of course. But if they were to get them to pay a subscription fee with the idea of potentially distributing, United Masters would all the profit, the artist would get paid zilch. So it's a losing battle there. Now, 5 billion streams sounds like a lot. And indeed, it ends up being, millions of dollars processed. But when you divide that by the number of artists, on average, we're seeing something about like 12,500 streams per artist. Now, of course, we know there are some who are well more than that and some who are lower, but we're talking about the average here. And on average, it doesn't make sense for somebody to sign up for a $5 a month subscription fee when that would take about 50% more streams than the average artist is getting on United Masters in order to pay for itself, just to break even, let alone to turn a profit on that. So it's similar to the district hit or TuneCore model where it's a flat fee, you get your royalties, but it just does not work for the audience that they're serving. We'll leave for another day whether DistroKid and TuneCore work for everybody as well, the same, or if they're similarly mispositioning the independent artists. But suffice it to say, United Masters, with the legacy that they've already defined for themselves, the business that they've already built, the reputation that they've already garnered as being pretty unstable, lots of executive turnover, things like that, I just don't trust it, and I wouldn't recommend to anybody that they sign up for this right now.